And that one in good shape. Yeah.
Yeah, we're recording it right now too. So, all right, cool. Thank you everybody for joining us. We have been using more and more checkpoint solutions when we kind of deliver a SASE solution, and we thought it might be useful to get together and explain kind of where we've been recently. And let me just pull my presentation up. And in particular, just give you guys a vision from Checkpoint. So we've got Eric Owings and Fareed Chima. Fareed is our sales engineer that's assigned to us, and we use him all the time on the service provider side. And then Eric Owings is a SASE specialist. So basically kind of the format today I wanted to give you a couple opening slides, turn it over to the Checkpoint people, let them go through kind of an overview of what we're doing here on the Checkpoint side, and then finish up a couple more slides from me because I want to show you a couple of additional things we're doing on the security front, and then really turn it over to Andy Boterman and go through the whole stake thing here. So as we go through this, in the interest of time, maybe if you go ahead and use the chat feature and throw some questions up if you've got any, and then we could come back and maybe answer those later, etc. But throw those up in the chat if you would. All right. Just a couple of quick slides from me. You guys may have seen this. I pulled this off last week from Gartner. This is Gartner's last 2021 SASE, kind of talking about, what are the components in a WAN edge and what are the components in security and the applications, on the right side, et cetera, these kinds of things. And you guys have been part of the conversation as well of, is SASE a single platform? Or is it, a best of breed set of tools to bring together the right solution for a customer? And this is Matt's SASE, right? We're certainly on that side of the best of breed. We are absolutely in bed with VeloCloud, and we've got some 750 installations, like 7,500 locations we've done just in the last 4 years. And it's really around what we believe is VeloCloud's strength as an SD-WAN platform. And you guys are pretty familiar with some of that, right? We've been using Checkpoint to then round out those solutions, right? And Checkpoint's going to go through, all their toolkits, the secure web gateway, what's been happening kind of on the ZTN, the zero trust network access, VPN clients. This happens all the time. We're talking to customers as, hey, they're trying to figure out secure, web gateway services for clients, et cetera, but do they still have firewall services, and how are we going to handle that, right? And you guys have heard this because Bill Franklin invented it, but I use it all the time. I really think the most successful SASE engagements that we have, particularly the kinds of customers, typically, larger, 500 employee and up customers, it's about incorporating other components, right? Because, walking in there with, let's say a Cato solution, as great as it is, it's not so easy to tear the parts and pieces of that around. So I want to kind of set the stage here. This is kind of what we're looking at. Well, we've had a lot of success deploying this with VeloCloud, et cetera. So I'll turn it over to Checkpoint now and to Eric. Eric, you want to go ahead and take the screen?
All right. Yeah, definitely. Grab the screen. All right, you guys able to see it now?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so just a quick reminder, this may seem obvious to some of the people on the call, but you'd be surprised from a customer standpoint how some people, it opens their eyes a little bit. But a lot of times people will think of Checkpoint, right, as kind of a legacy company because we've been around for 25 plus years. But I do like to remind people that, we've got while we do have a lot of history in hardware, we've got a ton of history in networking and security, and that's really what SASE is, right? It's the combining of those two things. So it's something that we're taking all that expertise that we've had over 2.5 plus decades, and we're moving that stuff and that expertise to the cloud, right? So I think that's one thing that uniquely positions us to provide a SASE offering for your customers. And just a couple of the kind of core things that we're seeing driving this that, if you guys hear these come up in offices, things like security, reducing the attack surface. Now when you have more and more people needing access to applications and things in the data center and stuff like that, you don't want to just give people full east and west access. along with, we're never going to have going back to the old normal. I think there's going to be ebbs and flows of remote workers now. So, the performance is a big piece of that, and, being able to scale up and down. Also just operationally. So supporting any kind of that old infrastructure with, firewalls and old VPNs and different things like that. People just don't really have a lot of the resources to do that. And then, one of probably the most important ones that if you guys have something, if a customer, has issues with any of that stuff, is the user experience, right? That's going to bubble up. That's going to cause them pain. That's what they're going to hear about the most and get the most grief about, right? So it's time to really, because of all this, rethink your network security. And you guys may have seen a graph kind of like this from Gartner a little while ago, and it has a couple more different pieces in here. But we've tried to boil it down to kind of the main use cases that we see people asking for. So when you hear people, bubbling up a ZTNA or remote access or secure web gateway, we really want to take that kind of use case approach. Like, it was mentioned, it's not really like somebody just goes out and purchases, hey, I want SASE. It's a journey that they're going to go on. They're probably going to have some components in there. And it's how do we help them with that, right? And we really like to take a use case driven approach to that and what they kind of have on their plate at the beginning, and then show them that, we can help them along that journey with all these other tools and solutions we have. So our core tenets, or what we really thought about when we were putting together the SASE offering, is network security and consolidating that. So to a certain degree, people do definitely want the best of breed, but it's a little bit of a convergence, right? Like you're seeing best of breed, but you're not seeing best of breed for everything. They do want to consolidate some of these services, right? Like you may want an SD-WAN, but then for 2 or 3 of these other things like CASB or DLP or remote access, ideally you'd like to kind of consolidate vendors just a little bit. Let's see, zero trust network access. So this is kind of becoming one of the de facto standards now for how people are accessing everything, whether it's applications, SaaS applications, stuff in the data center. Secure connectivity. More and more users are inside the office and outside the office, and they're doing tons of things and going to all different websites and applications to perform their job. And then at the core of that as well, you have to have all the advanced threat prevention and protection in there. And that's something that, with our threat cloud, we've been building all that intelligence and networking and security over 2.5 decades. So what does that mean from a product standpoint? We really have 2 core products that we boil it down to that address all of these use cases. And I'll kind of break it down now into those 2 products so that you guys can get an understanding of it. So first, we're going to have our remote access, and then we're going to have what's called our Harmony Connect internet access as well. So whether someone's accessing corporate resources and they're in the data center, they're on the network, if it's a SaaS application or internet, or they're using managed devices, they're in branch offices, we really want to be able to support that and really help them securely connect to anything from anywhere, from any device. So our first one is our remote access, and I'll just go ahead and build this slide out here. So this is actually and we have a couple flavors. It's the first one that I'm talking about. This is our clientless solution that we have. So we're going to do this. It's layer 7 access only. So again, when I was talking earlier about reducing that attack surface, when you have people you don't connecting from everywhere, it's not necessarily a great idea to let them just have broad east and west access to the network. So we're giving them that layer 7 access only. We're doing it in a clientless browser-based format. So, from an end user standpoint, it's really clean experience, just like using, Salesforce or any kind of other SaaS application that they're used to, right? And it's going to tie in with their identity provider. So they're going to have access only to the applications that they need to do their job and the portions of those applications they need to do their job. With that as well, we're going to provide full visibility. So you can log sessions, you can record an SSH session, for example, you can, log post and gets when they're working with web applications. And we even have built in kind of a lightweight privilege access management solution. So, if they want to reduce that and use that for some of their power users to make that a little more seamless when they're connecting.
Now, Eric, can we sell this standalone on an existing network?
Yeah, certainly. You can absolutely sell this standalone.
Okay, cool.
This
Yeah,
is bundled in with when we sell secure web gateway, but if that was a need, we can figure out how to peel that out, Chip. But this is included in every secure web gateway installation that CBTS does.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool, cool.
And
And where I'm going with that is kind of like what we saw with COVID, right? Where nobody had enough VPN concentrator capacity, if you will, when everybody got sent home.
Yep.
And so this could be a solution for something like that, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing all kinds of use cases for it. I mean, we have like wine.com's using it for distributors and third party. We've got like Shell's using it, I think, for like their AWS applications. So we're seeing just tons of different use cases for this technology because it's also something you can stand up really quickly and it's, super scalable for people. So
Perfect.
yeah, and just with the products that we have over our overall Harmony offering, these are just a part of it. But once you start stacking those together, you can either piece them all out separately or stack them together and make something really appealing for somebody from a financial standpoint.
And is the Harmony the direct challenger to the Zscaler, not ZPA? What's the other one?
ZIA.
ZIA, yeah, where it
Yeah.
includes a lot of those building components. So Chip, when we're kind of looking at customers getting out of the data center and legacy firewalls, and when they bring up, going to Zscaler or his Zscaler competitor or SASE with, Cato and X providers, right? This is that kind of the, I don't know, product, or I should say service delivery model, the as a service kind of thing, where they can build in the current structure, Okta, ping, third-party ADFS, and start utilizing this as that building block where they're going to, the other prezo, or I'm sorry, the other slide where you had a lot of the puzzle pieces fitting together. Because what we've seen with SASE is nobody's eating an elephant in a weekend. It's a journey. So if I can decommission several of those products that I've put in place for, this from not Checkpoint, right, but or Zscaler or, Palo Alto or competitors in there, they're starting to kind of put a flag in the sand, if you will, and start building it. It's imperative for us to be thought leaders and have the customer look at Checkpoint as a viable option.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing too, when you're talking about that and just kind of comparatively as well, we like to cover as many use cases as possible. And again, that's kind of our theme, is the use case driven approach. And speaking of that, with this, most competitors are putting a lot of their focus, or the majority of it, on the web application access, but we want to cover as many protocols out of the box as possible, right? So when people do have needs for RDP and SSH sessions, et cetera, we want to make sure that they're covered for that in the solution. And then as well, so this is coming soon. This is in EA right now with several customers, and we're just kind of making sure that we're prioritizing the right features. But you'll have layer 3 access as well, so full VPN access. This piece will have a client with it. It'll be the same client if they want to use the internet access and URL filtering I'm about to talk about in a little bit. All that'll be combined into one client, but it offers that for those power users. And so you may see a scenario as well where, again, reducing the attack surface, somebody might want to use the client solution for, part of their power users. But then if you have third-party vendors and suppliers and people like that, you want to break those users out and use the clientless solution. So you're going to have a lot of options there.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then let's go into the internet access portion and build this out. So yeah, with this, I mean, everybody's, moving 100 miles an hour and they're going to different websites, and, you've got laptops in the office and out of the office and some coming and going. So we just want to make sure when people are accessing the internet and they're, sanctioned cloud applications, that those users are protected, right? So we're building all our threat prevention into there. We've got the access control where you guys can determine, what they're allowed to access. You can filter out certain sites or categories. We have, like you can see down here, over 8,600 applications that we're integrated with. And I'll kind of show you an example on the next screen here. And then all the DLP and stuff. So, I mean, this is like when somebody's talking about CASB and things like that as well. It fits multiple use cases here, potentially for them. So just to kind of give you a snapshot, this is from like setting up a rule with this in our in our console. Somebody wants to restrict Google access or Drive access from uploading sensitive data. So we've restricted this particular user and the destination, and we're concerned in this case about HIPAA and PCI information, right? So very easy to set this up, and again, 8,600 plus applications, and we've got customers across all industries, like Grubhub, from anything to like Wellstar and First Digital and healthcare and banking and stuff like that using this. We've got some customers as well that are kind of using both of these solutions. But generally, what we see is somebody starts with
in
one
that
kind of
space, like HIPAA or other highly compliant arenas. Do you have a checklist? Like, are you monitoring, or are you getting feeds from other avenues to make sure they're compliant? Like, what does that mean, that last part of HIPAA compliancy? Like, how are you guys enabling the compliant discussion?
Yeah, as far as, so what this is doing is it's actually going and we're connecting with the application, and from a DLP standpoint, like we're flagging and doing a search to make sure that there's no data fields that hit that kind of HIPAA, something that would qualify as HIPAA data that's in those documents. Does that make sense?
Are you guys scanning it to make sure, like,
yeah, well,
social security numbers, or
let me follow up with you on that. I'll take
Yeah,
that.
so maybe I can answer. So yeah, so every document that is uploaded in this example is uploaded to Google Drive. We will be scanning that document to find relevant PCI credit card numbered fields or HIPAA medical record number fields. So we are scanning these documents, and if we find anything that violates any of these two contents, then we will block it. Otherwise, we will allow it to.
And Fareed, we support SSL encryption as well, so we can even take a look at that when it's being sent to HTTPS, correct?
Exactly. So with SSL encryption, we do have the ability to decrypt a packet, decrypt the content, and actually view what's inside a document before it gets uploaded or before it gets downloaded into your network.
Thanks, Reed. Always helpful to have the SE on the call. Yeah, and then so one thing too, just at the kind of forefront of this, right, is all our threat protection and our catch rate. So if you do have customers that are looking at us against a Zscaler or a Palo or somebody else, please encourage a POC. The more granular they go down the rabbit hole in that POC, the more confident we are that we're going to have our highest success rate in the deal. And let's see, just lastly, I know Matt was mentioning that you guys are, I think, fully on VeloCloud, but we have, kind of everything out of the box from an SD-WAN standpoint. We're not doing our own SD-WAN thing at this time. So we want to make sure no matter who they have, that we're integrated with them and we have that covered. But it sounds like the VeloCloud and Checkpoint SASE might be the route to go here, given the business that you guys have.
It's been our most successful to date. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and then just to kind of look at a quick snapshot at the overall architecture, right? So no matter whether we have remote users or branch offices or unmanaged devices, we're locking in with their IDP and verifying who that is, and then determining what they need from a service standpoint, right? They're going through the threat cloud and accessing the internet, or if they need to access, web applications or things in the data center on the back end, we're providing that access. And then again, only at the level that is appropriate for that user.
How are you guys handling the ZTNA handoffs from the user to, are they using it at the control panel? And then do you actually go out and ping the application or the identity and access management that they have access to that application? Kind of walk me through the ZTNA.
Yeah, we're doing that with the integration with the actual IDP. I was gonna say, Free, I don't know if you know a more technical way to explain it, but
so the identity provider.
So the way that works is, number one, we integrate with identity providers, right? There's two connections that happen. The first connection that we need to do is between a data center and our Checkpoint fabric or our cloud instance. That is a Docker connection. So you install a Docker container on your public cloud, on-prem data center, wherever it is, right? So the first connection is between your data center and our Checkpoint fabric. and that's through the doctor. The second connection that happens is between the end user and the identity provider and our checkpoint fabric again, right? So when a user logs into the portal, he authenticates through the identity provider. And then from there, he's presented with all the applications that he has access to. When a user clicks on on any of those applications, he is then rerouted to the data center, the relevant data center that is hosting that. There is no direct connection between the end user and the application. It's always proxied through our checkpoint fabric.
Okay, and is that also doing for remote browser isolation as well?
So we don't quite do remote browser isolation, but well, in its purest form, right? We do have another component called Harmony Browse that sort of does it in a similar way, but that's a whole other discussion, though.
Okay, all right.
Chip, we have not had, at least so far, I and my team have not had that much interest in remote browser isolation. So I'd be interested to see what you guys have been experiencing. But so far, that hasn't been big.
It's been kind of part of the evolution of SASE, but I wouldn't say it's a primary driver. It's a very nice to have, especially when you have a lot of users going outside the purview on their customer, on their at home laptops, using it for dual purposes. And
It's interesting. That's a good point.
It sounds good theoretically anyway when you hear.
Yeah.
One more quick point, Fareed, because I think you answered it, but I think Bill was asking, when we go to that identity manager, don't we use groups then to determine what applications we're showing?
Yeah. So again, we can have a deeper dive at a later time. We can show you a demo, but yes, through the identity provider, we can assign, say, a specific group in the organization has access to X, Y, and Z applications.
Yeah.
And so when a user, leaves that group for whatever reason, if once you remove that user from the identity group, then it automatically gets removed from our ZTNA as well.
Gotcha.
And subsequently into the SaaS apps and other applications that they have network access control. So you're kind of okay.
So our policy would say that something like, this group has access to X, Y, and Z. As long as a user is part of that group in the IDP, he will have access to X, Y, and Z.
And then decommissioning employees is the same, right? You go into the identity access, Okta, one login, whoever, and as soon as that gets pinged back to your control plane, you're going to enact on it, and they will not get access to those others. So the network access controls are across the spectrum.
Yep, 100%. Yeah.
And just so you know, team, as well, we have a pretty unique relationship with Checkpoint and how we're doing this as a service provider. And it allows us some economy of scales in the price point too. So some of these things like the secure web gateway, the ZTNA features, we include ZTNA with secure web gateway, and the secure web gateway, we can price either by user or by megabit of what internet access they need up in the Checkpoint Harmony cloud. So it can turn out to be a very aggressive price point compared to what you're seeing in Zscaler and Palo.
Yeah. And we actually do hear that a lot, or at least I do on the network side, where customers are sick of Zscaler nickeling and diming them to death.
Yep. So in the interest of time here, we got 5 o'clock. Let's let Fareed go through a couple things in email, and we'll get you to the stakes here.
Yeah,
this is good.
Yeah, I know you guys are hungry.
I'm here, man. Yeah.
So just real quick, 5 minutes on email. So this is a new acquisition we actually made. If you've never heard of Avanan before, they were a startup in the email space. What Avanan did was you have your regular, Microsoft EOP or ATP protection, or you can have your secure email gateway. This is your proof points, your any third-party email scanning provider, right? What your legacy stuff does is it allows emails to go right into your inbox and then if it finds anything malicious, it'll pull it out of the inbox. The problem with that is that the malicious emails can and will be delivered to your inbox, and depending on how fast you are in checking your emails, you can get infected. What Avanan did was they tied directly into the O365 API. And what their challenge was that they needed to scan the email before it hits your inbox, and also do it very, very quickly. And so that's the pattern that they were able to achieve. And so Avanan fits in right before your inbox. Now, this is not a proxy. This is an API-based solution. It sits right in your in Office 365, and so it'll scan the email, scan any documents, scan the any sort of forms that are in your email to make sure there's nothing malicious on it, and then delivers it to your inbox within seconds. You
What's
can
the
layer it.
malicious content database? Is that signature? Is it using AI? Kind of how are you guys seeing some of the new and creative malwares out there?
Very good question. So we're doing it in both ways. So we actually have signature based for known malware, and then we have a very large threat prevention engine with, I think there are about 60 plus different engines, AI and machine learning engines embedded into it, that is scanning for unknown malware. In fact, there's been a number of tests that we've done. NSS Labs, when they were around, when they tested our threat prevention system, we were able to beat it with a score of 100%, with less than 0.08% false positives. And this is on email security, right? So we are very confident in our ability to do threat prevention. And so when we are scanning these documents or scanning these emails, we will give you with a very good accuracy whether something is malicious or not.
This is not included, team, on the base offer, but this is then
Sure.
sold on a per user basis, and we've been doing more of that as well.
Now now Avanan can be layered on top of your EOP and ATPs as well. There's no reason you can't have those. Those are, EOP and ATP. These are Microsoft provided email security services. For the most part, they're okay. EOP on its own will not protect you. I think there's about 35% false positives on there. But with ATP, you get a little better result, but nothing close to what Avanan or your other security service can provide, right? And so it fits right in line with any of your other email security. I'm sorry, repeat that?
This can be run at the same time as ATP?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Next slide. So right now we like I said, we integrate directly into Office 365. We also support G Suite and a lot of the collaboration tools. So we're looking beyond just email, and we're looking more into everything you do within your office space, right? So whether it's using Slack, Teams, SharePoint, you're sharing documents, email is no longer the primary mode of sharing information, and so we have to be able to protect all these other applications.
So you guys are scanning Slack, huh?
We do have the ability to scan Slack, yes. Next slide. So just a little background on Avanan. They've been around since 2015. We just acquired them. I want to say it's been like 3 months now, 2-3 months now. When we acquired them, they were ranked #1 in G2 and #1 in Gartner peer reviews, 4.9 out of 5 stars. And they've been on there for 3+ years. And we have a lot of large customers that are already integrated into Avanan even before Checkpoint acquired them. So there's about 5,000 plus customers worldwide right now, and that number is just exploding. I think they had about 600% growth over the past year or something.
Just like CBTS.
That's right. Exactly. There you go.
So
All right,
very quick on email security. But if you have any questions or demos or anything, that would be happy to do.
yeah, and real quick, because we want to move on to you guys' stakes, but any questions you got on that area
you're good.
before we went through on?
Was it the Avanon product, was that specific to O365, or on that previous slide where you're talking through those other solutions, does it also protect those?
It also protects those. So before the acquisition of Avanon, we were only doing Office 365. In fact, a little not so secret is that when Checkpoint launched his Harmony Email and Office 2-3 years ago, we were using Avanon as an OEM product in the backend, but we were only using it for Office 365. With the acquisition of Avanon, we now have the ability to use everything in their portfolio, so we can now protect everything you see there.
Got it. So is it doing essentially the same thing across those different products then?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
And you said it was a Docker container, wherever it might be.
So this is not a Docker container. This is an API connection directly into.
Oh, the other one, API.
The other one
Docker
is
container was for
Yeah, the
ZTNA.
remote access is the
Yeah.
yeah.
So in this, then being an API, it's right from the Avanon cloud, or is it integrated with Checkpoint's cloud yet?
So that is in process right now. We are combining the two products. But yes, essentially it will all become one product at the end.
Yeah, and finding it's going to be through O365 or others, which are going to be in the main, internet hubs, San Jose, whatever, Ashburn, the usual suspects type of thing. So I get it from a networking aspect. One question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to be we're going to be integrated pretty much in the same vicinity, so there's least amount of lag.
A quick question on your previous on the legacy Checkpoint. I shouldn't say legacy. I don't like that term. It's just on the product from the Checkpoint. Did you guys have a private backbone going between the two or the three cloud nodes? If I go and access it from Chicago and then it's going over to Ashburn, is that your own private backbone, or is that just long haul fiber or internet between the two?
I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe we were using AWS's.
Yeah,
AWS's network.
These resources sit in AWS.
Okay.
From a VeloCloud perspective, we then take regional groups of VeloCloud locations, using our VeloCloud gateways, then connect to whatever appropriate regional instances for this in AWS. So
okay.
Yeah.
And soon to come
These
as
are
well,
gateways.
if the customer has a preference for Microsoft infrastructure.
Yep.
Yeah, because the .govs get all goofy, and some of the other ones out there, if we're going to get into that, in Iowa and Arizona, a few other places. So
Okay.
I'll talk to you guys about that.
All right, cool. Let me grab the screen real quick, and I'll give you a couple more thoughts here, and then we'll get you over to the stakes.
Are you going to whiteboard?
Nope, no whiteboard today. I know.
You going to whiteboard how to grill steaks? Is that what we're doing?
That would not be us, exactly. That would not be me. All right, I throw this up here because I have to do my job to remind you guys it's just part of this. Carl,
you want me to do this first, Matt, or you going to take over? We've all seen this. Your spec.
Yep. So just want to make sure that you guys have clearly seen here how we've been growing on the security side, and that really, in particular, CBTS has been continuing to group of services that's first started the enterprise side, kind of the Verizons and GEs of the world that we work with, moving that down into kind of low enterprise, and now moving it into high mid-market. So we've got a number of resources that we can bring in. Like we're working with C3 right now. We did a deal with Archway where we put 120 APs, Meraki APs in a warehouse and fixed a warehouse problem for them. As C3 continued to talk to them up there in Michigan, they're like, okay, we also need some help on the security side. So we pulled in Justin Hall, who runs our kind of enterprise vulnerability management group, right, who can do assessments and pen testing, et cetera. And it looks like they're pretty interested. We're going to meet with the CIO, et cetera, on this. So I want to let you guys know and keep you guys abreast that we're continuing to expand these products. And, that's what you've seen right here with the Checkpoint side. And then as well, we're moving into things like starting to try and bundle these together. Now, again, it's not a product that's really fits perfect in the, lower SMB. It's going to be more mid-market and above, but we're taking kind of groups of services, like on the patch management side, Big Fix for Avanti and the patch management, and pulling that together with endpoint protection and some backup, let's say with Commvault, things like this. And we're starting to talk to customers about pulling this together as a fully managed service for them. Now it's kind of best in breed, pulling them together, et cetera. And it's not situated yet that you could call us and we could deploy it easily in a 200-person firm. But as you start to look at larger firms and as you start to see us evolve, I want to let you know that we're continuing to add these kinds of things to the suite. So,
is it your team, Matt, that's kind of owning the go-to-market strategy with this, or is it?
It is,
The
no,
other
it's
guy?
not. It's a guy named Justin Hall and Krista Bruner.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to put those two in front of you as well to tell you the story of where we're headed on the CBTS side. So if you think that's of interest at all, be happy to pull Justin Hall and Krista Bruner to meet with you guys or meet with, a couple of you if you want to
we
do
can do that in December, January kind of thing, and get a little bit more dialed in with that. Appreciate it.
I think that'd be really useful for you guys. Yeah, but we'll make a point of figuring that out because Justin and Chris are just brilliant in what they've been doing there and building this stuff. So cool. All right, Andy, are you online here?
Oh.
I am.
All right.
Can you see me?
Not yet because I'm sharing my screen. Let me get rid of it.
Are we grilling with Andy?
You certainly can. You certainly can. And we're going to do this in cast iron on the stove. You can definitely do it on the grill. So if you have any specific questions, based on what you're cooking it on, certainly feel free to fire away and I can help you out. But yeah, did everybody get this seasoning?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure that nobody got left out on that. Okay, well, I think we're good to go then. So this cut that we're working with today is called a bavette. Has anybody here heard of a bavette before?
I've had one.
All right. So a bavette is just the French term for flank steak. We've all heard of flank steak before. Usually ends up, being taco meat or something like that. What's really interesting is when you use American Wagyu, all of a sudden, what would normally be used as taco meat becomes one of the best steaks money can buy. So we're going to do a little bit of prep on this. If you notice, once you get it out of the package, mine has been sitting out for about 45 minutes. And you'll notice it's shaped kind of like an airplane wing. So we're going to do a little bit of trimming, and I'll show you guys how to kind of extract a couple of the steaks out of this.
Andy, you said American Wagyu. Tell them a little bit about what that means. I was always fascinated about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the term Wagyu is just Japanese for cow or beef. So if anybody ever asks you that, super simple. There's not a whole lot of mystery behind it. They've been breeding these cattle in Japan for, quite a while at this point, but they really started honing it in about 100 years ago when several of the ranchers noticed that certain head of cattle that they had more intramuscular fat or more marbling in the steak, and they realized that equaled a lot more flavor and richness and juiciness and tenderness and everything that goes along with it. So what they did was they basically selectively bred those cattle, and kind of unknowingly they turned a recessive gene that was occurring in these cattle into a dominant gene. So when you get Japanese Wagyu, it always has a ton more marbling. That brings us to how did we get this steak here? So the Japanese government, they are very protective of their cattle, very protective of their beef. The cows over there are treated more like racehorses. They have paperwork, lineage. Yeah, it's a really big deal. So in the 1970s, the Japanese agreed to sell the United States 4 head of cattle. We brought them over and immediately started crossbreeding between Black Angus, which I'm sure everybody's heard of Angus before. One thing about Angus cattle, they're very hardy and they're very consistent. Wagyu is a little bit more all over the map as far as how the marbling shakes out. But when they started breeding them together, they got the more consistency of the Black Angus mixed with the higher levels of marbling of the Wagyu. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Now, there is some true 100% Japanese genetics Wagyu in the United States. There's a couple farms doing that. That stuff gets to be, that's like a whole next level of just insane marbling. But with Snake River Farms, I always know that when you order from them, it's going to be awesome. It's consistent. It's one of the best steaks you'll ever have. And again, this is a piece of flank steak. So the other interesting thing about the Wagyu portion is over the breeding, over the years of breeding, the chemical makeup of the intramuscular fat that is found in this steak actually changed and became higher in unsaturated fat. So you'll notice when you take this steak out and let it sit on the counter, that fat actually starts to render at room temperature, which is really remarkable. Black Angus, things like that, it'll start to get soft, but this, you'll just start accumulating basically rendered fat on the board almost immediately when you pull it out. So that's one of the reasons I really prefer to use cast iron with this, because that fat renders so well, and I want to keep that in the pan. I want to keep that around the steak. And actually, we're going to baste this steak with some herbs. So I've got some rosemary, thyme, and garlic, and then we're going to actually throw in a little bit of butter as well to baste over the top, and that's going to mix with the seasoning that we put on, as well as the rendered beef fat. And then at the end, we're going to have an awesome pan sauce. So yeah, that's a little bit about the cut we're working with. History of Wagyu. Are there any questions so far? Okay.
When you place it on the skillet, do you like to have it out for hours to warm it up a little bit? Like, what's your favorite temperature to kind of use it?
Yeah, so I usually, really depends on the thickness of the steak. The whole idea of letting a steak come up to room temperature before you cook it is, especially with thicker steaks, is to get in a more even cook in the middle. So with this one, it's pretty thick in the middle. So I pulled it out for about 45 minutes. It's not hours. It's nothing like that. But with like thinner steaks, sometimes I will take them directly out of the refrigerator and put them in, because it'll actually help me get a more even cook. But if it's more than an inch thick, I definitely like to let it sit out for at least a half hour, 45 minutes, just kind of come up to room temperature. So again, the interior is a little bit closer to the exterior when we start the cook. Does that make sense?
So I've always liked steaks that had like very lean. I even like bison, very lean.
Sure.
How is this kind of a steak with a lot of fat in it different than just a steak that's just got a big chunk of fat on it?
So this is, and when I'm talking about fat, again, this is that intramuscular fat. This is the marbling. I'm not talking about a big chunk of fat on the outside. It's not gristly. It's nothing like that. What that fat does is essentially bastes itself on the inside. So you're getting you're definitely getting a juicier steak. as well as more richness and flavor. That fat really carries flavor with it. With Wagyu, you'll notice sometimes a little bit more of a complexity to the flavor, a little bit more maybe minerality, which you might see minerality as well in grass-fed cattle, just because of their diet. But you get that with the fat in there. And again, this is a higher level of unsaturated fat. So there are people out there, I'm not going to make the claim publicly, but there are people who say that Wagyu is actually a more healthy steak than, say, a Black Angus, because that fat is higher in unsaturated fat versus saturated fat. So the only way I can really have you experience the difference is to try it. If you've never had a Wagyu before, it's a really different experience, and it's really, really fantastic. So, all right. I think we're going to get to trimming. So, a couple things that I want to touch on. So I am using a boning knife here. I really love this. For trimming, I use it a lot with briskets. You know, most of the time the steaks don't need a ton of trimming, but anytime I need to kind of get creative with the angles that I'm working with, I really love this knife. So I'm going to come in on this steak, and I'm going to just take, there's a little bit of excess fat right here and a little bit of silver skin underneath it. So what I do is I just get the tip of my knife underneath, and then I start working this way. And then what I do is I turn the knife backwards and I cut through. So now I have a little tab to hold on to. And then I'm just going to come underneath here and just take that little bit of silver skin and excess fat off. And again, a lot of this fat is pretty soft, and that will render in the pan. So I'm not going to go crazy cleaning this thing up. There's really not a ton of excess on here.
Yeah, this is not the fat like on a New York strip on the out on the edge, right?
Exactly. This is that pillowy, soft, you know, very renderable fat. The thing that I do like to clean up a little bit is some of that silver skin. Although that is pretty thin. It's not like the silver skin that you see on a brisket, for example. So
are you throwing that stuff that you just cut off in the pan when it's hot, or no?
no, I'm leaving that out. We're gonna have plenty in that pan. Great question though. One thing that you can do is certainly anytime you're trimming, hang on to your trimmings if you want to grind them for sausage, or if you want to render them all down and create like a beef tallow. You can definitely do that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you using a serrated knife to cut this, or?
No, this is
No.
just a
Okay.
straight, very sharp edge. It has a curvature of the blade, which really helps when you're getting into tight spaces. A little bit of flex in the blade. It's not quite as flexible as a fillet knife. And I like that because, especially when I'm working with other cuts that do have some of that harder fat, it's stout and it stays where it needs to go. So, okay.
Cool.
We're back to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 steaks out of this for the purposes of this class. Notice down here, it's much thinner. You got a nice chunk right in here, and then this is thinner. So right off the bat, I'm just going to take this and kind of separate that out. Now, you can certainly cook this as one big piece on the grill. Just know that this side is going to come to temp a lot quicker than this side because of the thickness difference. So I like to kind of remove this and then deal with it separately. If I want to do another steak with it, I can certainly do a quicker cook time with it and not end up overcooking it. So I'm going to put that aside. That is still amazing, high quality steak. If you do want to try to make tacos or something with it, it will be the greatest tacos you've ever had. So the other thing I want to point out about this, flank steak and the flank primal in general has a very directional grain. And when I say grain, it's almost identical to wood grain. You'll see it running this direction like this. So in order to get the most tender bite that I can get, I want to cut against the grain. If you cut a steak with the grain, it's a little bit more of a tough chew to it. So I'm thinking about that as I'm cutting these steaks. And I'm just going to take this and cut it straight in half so that we have two similar sized steaks. This one's a little bit thicker. This one's definitely going to come to temp sooner, but I have tools to deal with that. So we have these. The grain is running like this. So when I go to cut this, I'm actually going to cut it at a 45-degree angle and slice it like this. And I will have beautiful slices that are going to taste awesome, be super tender, a great bite.
So you're cutting across the grain for these smaller ones. Are they going to be like a half-inch thick or an inch thick, you think? Or
yeah, probably, they taper. Again, it has the shape of an airplane wing. So the edges of it are certainly going to get a little bit more cooked than the interior, the dead center. But I'm telling you, it's going to turn out awesome. You'll notice that as we start to cook, these smaller sides will kind of puff up a little bit and it will even out. I just wanted to make sure that I have, 2 steaks. These are probably in the 8 to 10 ounce range. And this steak is so rich and delicious, like 8 to 10 ounces is plenty. And I'm a big guy, trust me. I like to eat a 40 ounce ribeye, but once I have this stuff, it is so rich. You really feel very satisfied at the end of eating this steak. Okay, so now I've got this Jacobsen salt. This stuff is awesome. It's really simple. It's garlic, black pepper, and salt. SPG, as a lot of people call it. Salt, pepper, garlic. With beef specifically, I really like to let the meat shine. And I feel like garlic, pepper, and salt are like more highlighters than anything. They're going to pull flavors out as opposed to adding flavors in. So another thing I like about this is we're going to do a really nice sear on this steak. And if you're going really hot and you have a rub that has a lot of sugar in it, that sugar will burn. And we don't want to burn. We want to caramelize this steak, or something called the Maillard reaction, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But let's get back to seasoning. So one tip about seasoning, I like to season up high. The reason I like to season high is because it coats everything super evenly. If you're down here trying to season, you're going to end up with pockets that are way saltier than others. And so get about a foot above whatever you're seasoning, and then get some good coverage on there. This is a decent sized piece of meat, so it can handle some salt. Then we're going to flip this over. We're going to do the other side as well. And if you have any big pieces of fat, like this one's not too bad. This should render out. But if you have any, I didn't go over trimming the back side of this, but same process as the top. And we'll just season that up a little bit. And then what I like to do is take and scrape in any overspray that I had. And then you can coat the edges with that. And if you need a little bit more, feel free. Sometimes I'll lean these against each other.
And Andy, you have the SPG and then you had what are the leaves there? The herbs or whatever? What are those?
Yeah, so this is rosemary, thyme, and garlic. That is what I consider the holy trinity of beef
Okay, cool.
flavors. And again, we're going to put them in the pan. And so they will start to release some of the oils once you get some heat on them. And once they start releasing the oils, those flavors are just all together, it's unbelievable. And you can use this same method with any steak. If you buy a steak at a gas station for $2 and do this preparation, it'll be incredible. So it's just that much better when you're using a super high quality cut like this.
Did you say you added the Holy Trinity? Was it rosemary, sage, thyme, or
It's
Rosemary,
rosemary
thyme, and
and
garlic.
garlic.
oh, garlic? My bad.
Yep.
Did you add that before you're putting it on the cast iron skillet?
We're going to get to that. So I'm going to get these in the
Okay.
pan, and then I'm going to give them a minute or two, and then I'm going to add them in with the addition of some butter. So that brings me to the pan. I'm actually going to get this thing started up so that we can get it up to temperature.
What do you
I
think?
like to use somewhere between 400 and 500 degrees in the surface of the cast iron. Everybody's stove is a little different. If you're using gas, typically you're running wide open. You're going to run hot. This electric range is, I run about 7 out of 10, and it gets me absolutely that perfect, like 450, 500 degrees. So you got to know a little bit about what you're dealing with, but like I said, if it's gas, hotter is better for sure. And I'll show you a couple tricks to figure out when your pan is up to temp. One thing, I use grapeseed oil in this cast iron pan. The main reason I like to use grapeseed oil, it has a high smoke point and it's neutral flavored. You can use a myriad of different oils, vegetable oil, canola oil, avocado oil, things like that. With grapeseed, it's kind of the best of both worlds because it's, again, high smoke point, so it's not going to burn on me. And then it's also completely neutral. I don't want to be adding any other flavors to this. So essentially, the one thing to avoid is using olive oil in your pan. Olive oil will burn, and it also does add some flavor to the steak that I don't necessarily care for. I like to add olive oil when I really want that olive oil flavor in there.
That is a great tip, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really need like a teaspoon of this. I take it a little dime sized piece in there, and then take paper towel and rub it around so that the inside is evenly coated. And that's all you need. We're not deep frying this steak. We want to get a good sear. So now that the seasoning is on, I'm letting it sit for a couple minutes to kind of bind to these steaks. It's actually pulling water to the surface, which is a good thing. Anytime you can get some of that water out of a steak, if anybody here has had dry aged steaks, the reason dry aged steaks taste the way they do is because they are removing the water and leaving behind nothing but the steak. So you're getting like beef concentrate, essentially. The more water content there is in a steak, you're going to essentially boil it from the inside a little bit, and also it becomes a lot harder for you to get a good sear on it. So you'll start to notice some of that water coming to the surface. Okay. Now, how I can tell, I'm using grapeseed oil. How I can tell when this pan is ready is I will start to see very small wisps of smoke coming off the surface. And that's when you know it's good to go. You can definitely feel it with your hand. But again, when you see those small wisps of smoke, that's what you're looking for. It's time to get them in the pan. So speaking of that, I am going to pause for a quick second, reset the camera over to the stove so you guys can see what I'm doing. And then we're gonna be getting these things in the pan. So I'll be right back.
This is so cool because steak is absolutely my favorite meal.
It's hard to
We love this guy. We've used him a couple times, and I realized that everything my dad taught me about cooking a steak was wrong. It was like, use charcoal, you know,
Well,
put
and
Lowry salt on it. I'm like, okay, that's what I do. You know,
I
take it
still
right
see
from the
people
fish to the thing.
stabbing their meats to flip it. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You know, all
That's
these old school things. You're like, you got to be a man. You got to do it the right way. And you're like, like you said, everything we've seen over our dads do, they never learn the right way, which is, you know, exactly what Andy's kind of teaching us, and we've learned a little bit over the years.
They're just
That-
making it
yeah,
up.
it's,
They didn't know.
They didn't
For
know.
some reason, there got to be quite a bit of toxic masculinity associated with cooking, you know, barbecue, and I don't know where it came from.
Totally.
But yeah, this is again, you know, that I definitely love a steak cooked on charcoal. Don't get me wrong. You know, if you're using a fork to flip it, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to change anything.
No,
These are just the things that I have learned from other people who came before me, who are really, really good at what they do, and I trusted their opinions. And after making hundreds upon hundreds at this point of steaks, I feel like I got it dialed in pretty awesome. So
Now, one thing, Andy, the butter. Did you brush the butter on the steak, or?
I'm going to show you.
Oh, okay.
So remember we talked about using grapeseed oil because we didn't want it to burn.
That's in the
butter,
pan. Yeah.
Butter burns very quickly. However, when
Okay.
we get it in the pan and baste it and keep it moving,
Okay.
you won't burn it. You'll basically create brown butter.
Okay.
So you'll cook some of those milk fats that are in there and release a whole nother level of nutty, delicious flavors.
Okay.
But you want to keep it moving. You don't want to put butter down right away, directly on the surface, because it will burn. So, okay. I'm going to get this pan back on, and
You ever use
when I got the
vegan
camera
butter?
going, I don't know if you guys can see this on the camera, but there's some very light wisps of smoke coming off of this.
Okay.
And again, cast iron pans, it can be a $20 Lodge from Target. You can spend as much or as little on cast iron as you want, pretty much. They're all going to do a great job. One of my favorite things to do is go to antique shops and find old cast iron and recondition it. That stuff is awesome. So, and you can get some of those for $5. Okay. We've got some good wisps of smoke coming out. So I'm going straight in the pan with both of these. Now, when I get it in the pan, I just want to gently push down. One of the reasons for that is, again, we want to sear this steak. The reason for that is something called the Maillard reaction. And the Maillard reaction occurs when heat interacts with the amino acids and the natural sugars occurring within the steak. And it also happens in baked goods. So anytime you see like that perfect golden brown color, that's the Maillard reaction. And that chemical reaction releases several incredible flavors. Again, you might get a little smokiness, a little nuttiness, some of that caramelized sweetness. So always make sure that you have a good sear on your steak, because that is the flavor that we're looking for. All right. So I'm going to just kind of leave these alone for about 1 minute, just to establish the sear. Are there any questions in the next 30 seconds?
Okay, and then you're gonna flip it over, sear the other side, and then you'll get into, all right, Chip likes his rare.
Right.
I would cook him for X amount of minutes.
Yep, absolutely. So here's one thing I will say. I am keeping track of the time. However, whenever I'm cooking meat, I don't cook by time, I cook by temperature. And the only way I can do that is with an instant read thermometer. So if you do not have one of these, I highly suggest, yes, there you go. I highly suggest picking one up. This is the ThermoPen from ThermoWorks. This is kind of the industry standard. They're about $100. If you don't want to spend that much, if you're not cooking that much, you can get, for $20, you can get one on Amazon that'll work well as well. These are totally waterproof. They're very tough, durable. Yeah, they're They're awesome. So
for somebody who likes to cook a lot and she's like a chef and stuff,
yeah,
would that be a great gift item for Christmas?
that would be a fantastic gift item.
Okay,
Absolutely. Okay, so I just flipped these. Next step, I am going to get some butter in the pan. Now we're doing 2 steaks, so I'm gonna use a little bit more than what I usually do. So this is probably 3 to 4 tablespoons. I'm gonna get that right down in front, get that starting to melt. And then once it starts to melt, I'm taking the rosemary, the thyme, and then the garlic. One other quick note, the garlic, I have left this in the paper. So the reason I do that is, again, I want to avoid burning. The paper does protect it a little bit, and you're still getting all that infusion of the flavor. And then at the end, you've got like this beautiful roasted piece of garlic that you can pop like a piece of candy, and it's unbelievable. And it doesn't taste all charred and burnt. Okay. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space and move these back just a hair. And then get that butter melted. And then this is the fun part. So all I do is I get the herbs in there, and you'll start to hear some popping and snapping. That's the thyme. The thyme will actually start to release its water content. So don't be alarmed. But just tilt the pan back towards you. And then I like to put the herbs right on top of the steak and then spoon this butter right on top.
that looks awesome.
And if you could smell this in here right now, I know they always say that on cooking shows, but my God.
We need
So I'm
that
gonna keep that moving.
Zoom model now.
All right.
It's the metaverse, Bill. It's coming.
The next thing, because we cut these very similar in size, I'm actually going to give these sides some of their own attention. One way to do that when you're cooking 2 steaks, I like to hold one up and lean them against each other. And sometimes it works and sometimes it's finicky.
Yeah.
We're going to do this side on this one. So you can just hold those for a minute. And then try to carefully, without knocking them over, go back in, tilt the pan, and get some more of this garlic butter herb mixture. Now, again, we're infusing a ton of great flavor into these steaks, but we're also creating an insane pan sauce. So we're actually going to pour what's left in this pan over these steaks when we're done. And it's going to be awesome. Okay.
Butter?
Now that we...
Oh, sorry, real quick. For the butter, do you prefer salted or unsalted? Because I know we put salt on it.
I prefer unsalted. The main reason is I really like to control the amount of salt that I have in a dish. I can always add salt, but it's real hard to take it away. So just as a rule in general, I always buy unsalted.
Interesting. Great question, yeah.
And again, we're starting to get some good color. And once I get all 4 sides started here, I'm going to take my first temperature reading and just kind of see how the cook is going. I can tell you right now, I know this thinner one is going to have to come off sooner, but that's okay. That's the beauty of the instant read thermometer, is I know exactly where it's at. And I'm going to teach you guys a quick trick to remembering your steak doneness temps. It's super simple. All you have to do is remember that 120 degrees is rare. If you can remember that, 120 equals rare, you'll be good, because then it's just 10-degree increments all the way up. So if you want medium rare, it's 130. You want medium, 140. Medium well is 150, and well done is 160. So I am going to pull these off of here about 5 to 7 degrees earlier than the finished temp that I want. because there's going to be some carryover, and we're going to let these rest. And I'm going to talk about the importance of resting too, once we get to that point. But now is the time for me to take my first reading. So I'm going to take the small one. I'm at about 106 degrees in the fattest part of that one. And actually the bigger one, I'm going to try again. The bigger one's actually 110. So the bigger one's cooking a little bit quicker, which is A-okay. Okay. I'm going to flip it again. And we're just building that crust up. It's just this beautiful mahogany color. Nothing is burnt. You don't want dark black. You're going to get a lot of carbon in there, and those flavors are not good. It's going to be that acrid, not good flavor. But when you have this beautiful, what's that?
When you're taking the temperature, you stick it in there, and you don't stick it all the way through, right? You try to get it like right in the middle.
Correct. Yep. So once you get your instant read thermometer, you'll kind of get a feel for it, because they're all slightly different. But like this one has a tip that's, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more, 3/8. And so I just have to kind of know about where that is in relation to the depth of the steak.
Got it.
Okay. So this small one kind of took off on me a little bit. So in the middle, I'm at like 120, 124 right now. So I'm going to actually pull this one off. I'm going to give it one more flip. I'm going to pull this smaller one off at 125 because I want these perfectly medium rare. So I'm going to let that sit while this one continues. And I'm going to temp this one more time as well.
It's interesting how much you have to move it around to make it a good steak and pour the sauce on it and stuff.
So that's another, what's funny, you're talking about moving it around. That's another definite misnomer. You know, the idea that you flip a steak once, you know, that's my way of doing burgers. But with a steak, I'm trying to build up a crust. So the more surfaces I can have doing that, the better. There is no downside to continually flipping a steak. As a matter of fact, if you were to do this whole thing on like a charcoal grill or a pellet grill or whatever, the method that I suggest is it's literally just keep flipping. So every 2 minutes, flip it. And as you continue to flip it, you're going to notice that you're building color and flavor and all of these delicious things on the outside, because you're giving that entire surface the attention it needs.
Awesome. You can also use the cast iron pan in a grill, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing too. Especially with Wagyu, again, there's so much fat that can be rendered in these. I actually prefer to use cast iron on the grill because for 2 reasons. Number one, you're going to have some possible flare-up issues because of how much rendered fat is falling down onto the coals. And every time that rendered fat falls into the coals, you're losing a little bit of flavor. Certainly some of it hits the coals and comes back up through the meat. I get that. But honestly, when you've got it in the pan like this and it's just basting in its own juices, there's nothing quite like it. It's almost like running on a rotisserie. All right.
Something tells me you would make a kick-ass omelet too.
I do okay with the omelets, that's for sure. All right. I'm going to check this temp one more time. All right. I think we're right in that 126. So I'm going to pull this one. And then I got that pan off the heat. I want to make sure that sauce cools off. So it's going to be a little bit dark because of all of the caramelization happening. but it is absolutely delicious. So we're going to reset and meet you back at the cutting board over here. I'll be right back.
Hey, Matt, what kind of wine would you serve with this?
What kind of wine would I serve?
Or Chip?
Any wine for me. I love all wine. It doesn't make any difference what it is.
Yeah, for me, I'm going with like a Stag's Leap Cab kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Apparently, you're paying Chip too much money, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah. $3 chuck
No,
for you there, Matt.
That's right. Exactly.
It's so funny. Yeah. I did skip over the section where I talk about wine and actually beverages in general. So I want to get into that a little bit.
To each his own a little bit, right? You could do whiskey, you could do wine, you can do all sorts of fun pairings.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing I always try to say, it's your mouth. Whatever tastes good to you, don't let anybody hate on you for it. Might judge you a little bit, but that's all right.
That's the best way.
As far as wines go, scientifically, big, bold red wines are really good for steak because the tannins in that wine, that tannic structure actually chemically combines with the fat molecules that are coating the inside of your mouth and strip your palate. So every time you take a bite of steak, you take a sip of wine when you're done, and you go back to the steak, it's like having the first bite all over again. So definitely big cabs, big red blends. Anything big and red is awesome. As far as beers go, if you're more of a beer drinker, I really like one of two styles, either light European styles, like a Helles, a Pilsner, Kolsch is another good example. They're a little bit lighter, a little bit sweeter. They play in really well with the kind of unctuousness, that fattiness of the steak. But then you can also go into dark beers. So your porters, your stouts, things like that, because they are made with roasted malts. In a very similar way that we put a char on this steak, we put the sear on. That's what they do to the wheat and the barley when they make that malt. So all the flavors play really well together. So if you want to do a porter or a stout, awesome with a steak. I really like bourbon with my steaks because there's a little bit of sweetness there. But again, bourbon is made in oak barrels that have been charred on the inside. You can kind of see the theme running. So you kind of want to pair like with like. So a whiskey has a little bit of that smoky char flavor to it. Works awesome with a steak.
And now they have those really cool red wines aged in bourbon barrels, which are awesome as well.
Yep, you can do kind of the best of both worlds for sure. One thing I want to talk about really quick. So that was roughly, I would say, about 3 minutes per side on all four sides. I did move around a little bit, but that's what got us there. So the hard part is with Wagyu, because it's so tender, you can't do the touch test for it. Everybody's heard about that. If you want it rare, you do, one finger and you touch here. If you want it medium rare, you do this finger. That whole method goes out the window because this steak is so soft, and it's really, really awesome. So the best way is obviously to have the instant read thermometer and know exactly what temperature you're at. That being said, I am letting these rest. If you don't remember one thing I talked about today, remember this one. Resting is probably the most important stage in cooking a steak. And I've heard that my whole life, and I needed some more proof. So I started digging into it. And essentially what happens when you cook a steak is you're searing the outside, but the inside, all that marbling is rendering. And so it's liquid. It is in a liquid form. It is sitting inside that steak. So if you were to take it off immediately and cut, into this steak, that liquid runs out. If you let it sit for even 5 minutes, the muscle structure inside begins to soak it back up. And that's when you get a true, juicy, tender, delicious bite. There was a study that was done where they took 3 steaks that were identical. They took them exactly from the same animal, same cut, just right next to each other. They cooked them exactly the same to the same temperatures. The only difference was they cut into one right away. They let one sit for 5 minutes, and then they let one sit for 10 minutes before they cut into them. There was actually a 4th steak. They did leave one for 20 minutes. And then they weighed the steaks to see how much of the moisture had ran out. And so the difference between cutting into a steak immediately versus waiting just 5 minutes was a 20% loss. 20% of the weight had run out. If you waited 5 minutes, it was down to 5%. 10 minutes was 3%, and 20 minutes was 1%. So I'm a fan of eating my steak hot. So I definitely like at least the 5 minute. And it definitely depends on the size of the cut you're working with. So if I'm cooking a 20-pound brisket, sometimes I'll let that brisket rest for 6 or 7 hours before I actually slice into it, because there's so much rendered fat in there that needs to be reabsorbed by that meat. And if I cut into it, I'm just going to ruin it. So there you go. And I think we've been letting it sit pretty good. So we're going to cut into this.
Andy. Thank you.
And you're so welcome.
Team too. Thank you, guys.
All right. So remember how I was talking about this grain structure running at a 45-degree angle?
Yeah.
If I was going to put this on a plate and, serve somebody to give a good presentation, I'm going to kind of come at this at a 45-degree angle and then at a slight bias to show more of the inside. So you can already see the juice.
Yeah.
And that's after letting it rest. So trying to stay on that 45 degrees. And it's so soft and so tender. This knife is super sharp, and it's it's squishing a little bit because of how tender it is. So if I was to put that on a plate and then position these, something like that. My wife hates it when I do that. She's like, don't cut my steak. So it's her steak. I'm actually going to leave that one alone. But you can see, because I had the thermometer, I know this is an absolute perfect medium rare bite with a great crust on the outside. Now, I took some of that pan sauce, and I'm actually going to just dump that right over the top and then take it even further. Now, you could come back in with a flake salt or a finishing salt if you wanted. You just got to be careful with that. Some of those salts get to be a little bit much. So you don't want to over salt, certainly. But I'm going to grab a piece of this and take a bite and see how we did. I'm pretty sure we've nailed it. Mm-hmm.
And you said when you cut the meat, you were with the grain to show off the...
I was cutting against the grain.
Against it, okay.
Yep. Definitely want to do it against the grain. And it's really hard to explain exactly how it works, but if you think of the meat fibers, I'm trying to think of, they're these ones especially are long and straight. So think of a bundle of straws, for example. And if you cut against it, it's a lot harder to get them separated. With it, it's harder. The meat just comes apart better when you cut against the grain when you're doing a slice.
Does that also make it easier to eat, if you will?
Yes. And again, on this cut, it is so tender and so juicy. It doesn't really matter as much as some others. But man, if you take a cheap steak and cut it against the grain, and it's very difficult on like ribeyes and New York strips. The grain isn't as pronounced. It's kind of spinning in all directions, so it's not as important there. But when you're talking about a bavette like this or a skirt steak, especially when they have very directional grain, you always want to slice against it.
When you're like when you're just like a regular person, not a wealthy person who will buy these steaks all the time, and you
Sure.
go to the grocery store, what would you get? Would you get like a fillet or?
I get that question all the time. I'm a ribeye guy.
Okay.
And if you're trying to save some money even further,
Yeah.
Find a butcher and ask them to cut you chuck eyes.
Okay.
A chuck eye is actually technically in the chuck primal as opposed to the rib primal, but it's the front side of the ribeye. So if you've ever had a standing rib roast, all the bones coming down,
Yeah.
basically the front section of that is chuck, and usually that is sometimes it's discarded and turned into ground, but meat coming from the chuck primal doesn't fetch the price that the rib primal does, so they separate that. That's a really awesome cut.
Okay,
and
then and sorry to interrupt, can you use the same methodology and the same kind of recipe for any of those?
100%. That's one of the reasons, when I started doing this, I wanted something that was accessible, but also produced the best results. And everybody has access to an oven and a cast iron pan. If you don't have one, everybody can go out and buy one. It's not a $1,500 pellet smoker. Anybody can make steak this good in their house.
Awesome.
And that's one of the reasons I really love doing this method and showing people. And I've had students in these very classes that have like, I have never cooked a steak before, and that was better than any steak I've ever had in a steakhouse that I paid $300 for.
Awesome.
And that makes me so happy, because the reason I got into this was to take a lot of the pretentiousness out of cooking. And again, we mentioned some of the toxic masculinity that goes along with barbecue. And, I didn't go to culinary school. This is just something I've done since I was a kid. And I've always loved the grill, and I've always loved cooking. And it really took the pandemic for me to kick it into, doing more education, because I was always fielding phone calls from my friends, and like they'd be out cooking something on their smoker and FaceTime me and be like, how do I do this? And I'd walk them through the process, and I always loved it. I think food is such a universal like love language that we give each other. And I think more and more people are interested in learning how to cook. My whole goal is to take out as many barriers as possible for people, to get them in there and experience how much fun this is to cook something masterful when it's really not that hard. All the information's out there. You just gotta get in and do it. So yeah, another thing too is, if you guys enjoyed yourself and you have any other questions that you think of after this is over, feel free. I'm on like all the social media channels. So I have an Instagram page, BBQ with Boterman. I'm also a professional photographer and food stylist. So I have a ton of fun cooking crazy things, plating them and photographing them as well. So I'll actually put that in the chat. But anytime you have questions, shoot me a message.
I got
I
a
love
quick
it.
question.
Sure.
I used to do ribeyes for the longest time and stopped because just inconsistency with them, and switched over to filet, so we pretty much do filet only.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on getting good, consistent ribeyes?
It is a challenge. Number one thing I can say is you got to know what you're looking for. And for me, that is the marbling. The reason that fillets are so consistent is there's hardly any fat in them. So there's nothing to really waver the quality. I would never spend insane money on like super high end fillets when a choice is going to taste almost identical. So looking for that tight white marbling, you want those really fine striations throughout the steak. And then to nerd out a little bit more when it comes to ribeyes, the ribeye cap, or the spinalis is what it's called, around the edge. That chunk of meat is one of the best bites in anything steak related. So if you see a lot of marbling within that, typically you're going to do well with the rest of the steak.
Okay.
You have to find a place that consistently stocks quality, which is difficult and can be expensive. The one thing I would say is Costco continuously knocks it out of the park with their meat selection. You might have to do a little digging. I drive people nuts because when I go to pick out steaks there, I'll dig through the whole damn bin to try to find the ones that I'm making that night. But if you put in a little bit of effort and you find a place that you know has good quality, you'll be able to find it. The other thing is try to find a butcher, a local butcher that's doing good stuff. Befriend them. Walk in and ask them what they would do. They see this stuff every day. They know what they've got in the case. They can definitely help you out. So it is a challenge, but there are ways around it.
Yeah, I'm actually in Texas, and we got HEB, which grocery stores, which actually allow theirs to age for 14 days, which is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
They have a good selection there.
Yeah, I'm jealous that you guys have HEB because I've seen a lot of the stuff that's posted online. I was like,
yeah,
well,
there's a place down in Austin I haven't been able to get to yet. It's called Salt and Time. He does a lot of age stuff. He'll do like 90,
I've seen his stuff.
90 day, like I think he'll even do like 120 day age stuff if you request it. But
yeah,
John Pollan, did you get all this down for Evernote?
That's great. That's great.
I'm just about to start eating this damn thing.
Right.
Yeah, I can't let this sit until my wife gets home. So one of these is going to be gone.
Yeah.
I've got to transfer all my notes to regular, computer stuff.
This was recorded too, I think.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I do second the finding the local butcher though, because I mean, the average grocery store, is still going to be pretty darn good. But if you're looking for a specialty cut, or you just want that extra quality that kind of comes with knowing the local butcher, there's no better option.
Yeah, and I'll second the Costco one. Been going there for years, and even them. I do some smoking of, obviously the rib and the pork is some of my favorite, but I've been doing country style ribs. So when you get into the different aspects of it, and everyone's just like, well, why doesn't anybody know about country style ribs? I'm like, because it's between, it doesn't have the bone in it. It's not competition. It's not anything. It was the history of country style ribs. I'm just like, I'm in love with them. And basically it's a loaf of rib meat. I'm like, this stuff is beyond compare.
It's a slice of the pork shoulder is what it is.
Yeah.
If you've done pork butts before, with the country style ribs, it's basically pork butts, but actually sliced into rib size kind of sections, and they're unbelievable. The meat is so rich. It's really, really good.
Yeah, everyone around me is just like, oh, you're doing country style ribs again this weekend? I'm like, geez.
Yeah,
I'm
coming over.
Smoking a lot of beef short ribs. Those things.
That's my favorite.
Insane.
Beef short ribs are the best bite in barbecue, in my opinion. I like them better than brisket, and I love brisket.
Right. Andy, much appreciated.
Cool, guys.
Yeah, really
absolutely. So
awesome event, you guys. This is super cool.
I put my my info in the chat, so feel free, give me a follow on the social media stuff. And again, totally here for you if you have any questions regarding anything. Cooking related, could be barbecue, could be whatever. I've pretty much done it all. Pastries, not so much. I'm getting more into baking, but
What's
I
your
know
best
people, so I
dish?
can help you out.
Thank you, Andy, very much for
Andy,
doing
where,
this.
What's
where
your-
are you located? What state are you in?
So I'm right outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, cool, cool. A lot of good pike fishing up there.
Oh, you know it.
Let's go
I love
fishing.
Andy, what's your best dish?
Oh man.
Huh. What does your wife think your best dish is?
Ah,
She's running the camera, so what is my best dish? Steaks. She's got to say steaks for sure.
Awesome. We lucked out then.
And salmon. I do a ton of different variations on salmon that she absolutely loves. So, yeah.
Wow,
All right. Well, thank you so much.
well,
Yeah,
tell your
thanks,
wife
guys.
thanks. Have her enjoy the dinner. So thanks, Andy.
Thanks, CBTS.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Everybody have a good
Appreciate it.
night. And Andy, your best advice is to drink with every bite. That's what I'm going to
Yeah.
do.
100%. Absolutely. And then
That's
when
your
you're done,
takeaway, huh, Matt?
Wine per bite.
That's how you pace yourself.
when
Yes.
you're done, you keep drinking. That's how you know it's good.
Well played.
Guys.
All right. See you
Appreciate it,
guys.
Matt.
Yeah.